On October 15, 1993, Carol Williams, a 30-year veteran nurse at Mount Sinai Hospital in Queens, New York, vanished during her morning commute. Known for her reliability, arriving 15 minutes early with her thermos of coffee and worn burgundy leather purse, her absence at 7 a.m. stunned her supervisor, Margaret Torres. The cardiac unit buzzed with chaos, but Carol's empty locker signaled an unsettling void. Something was not right from the very first moment her supervisor, Margaret Torres, noticed Carol's empty locker at 7 a.m. The cardiac unit buzzed with its usual morning chaos, but there was an unsettling void where Carol's steady presence should have been. Margaret had worked alongside Carol for 8 years through budget cuts and double shifts through the AIDS crisis that had stretched their small team beyond breaking points. She knew Carol's patterns better than her own family's. Carol Williams simply did not disappear. The leather purse would become crucial evidence later, though nobody knew it that morning. Carol had carried the same burgundy bag for over a decade, its brass clasps worn smooth by thousands of openings, the strap darkened by years of New York subway commutes. Inside, she kept everything organized with the precision of someone who had spent her career managing life and death situations. Her Metro card in the front pocket, always loaded with exactly 1 week's worth of rides, her reading glasses in their blue felt case, and a small notebook where she jotted down grocery lists and patient reminders in her careful handwriting. But on October 15, that purse never made it to Mount Sinai. Carol's roommate Sarah Chen would later tell police that she had seen Carol gathering her things around 6 a.m., the same routine they had shared for 2 years. Sarah worked nights as a medical technician and was usually getting ready for bed when Carol prepared for her day shift. They developed a comfortable rhythm, passing each other in the narrow hallway of their shared apartment on 41st Avenue, exchanging sleepy hellos and brief updates about their respective patients. If you have ever wondered how quickly a normal life can become a mystery that consumes an entire community, this case will show you exactly how it happens, and why some stories stay with us long after the headlines fade. The investigation that followed would reveal just how many people had been watching Carol Williams without her knowledge, and how a single morning commute could hide secrets that would take 30 years to uncover. The Roosevelt Avenue subway station, where Carol caught the 7 train every morning, was a concrete maze of underground passages and echoing footsteps. During rush hour, thousands of commuters flowed through its turnstiles, their faces blank with the urban anonymity that makes cities both vibrant and dangerous. Security cameras existed in 1993, but they were sparse, often broken, and the footage quality was grainy at best. Most establishments along Carol's route relied on the assumption that broad daylight and busy sidewalks provided adequate safety. Margaret Torres made the first call to Carol's apartment at 8 a.m., her voice tight with the kind of worry that comes from knowing someone too well. When no one answered, she waited another hour, then called again. By 10 a.m., she had contacted the hospital's human resources department, who assured her that missed shifts happened even to the most reliable employees. But Margaret had seen Carol work through the flu, through family emergencies, through personal heartbreak that would have kept most people home for weeks. This was not about a missed shift. This was about a woman who had vanished from the most routine part of her day, leaving behind a mystery that would test the limits of what a community could endure. The first 48 hours after Carol's disappearance moved with the mechanical precision of institutional response. Police officers took statements from coworkers, roommates, and neighbors, each interview following standard protocols designed to gather information, while managing the overwhelming volume of missing person reports that flooded New York City precincts daily. Detective Mike Sullivan drew the case on October 16, approaching it with the methodical professionalism that had served him well during 15 years with the New York Police Department. Sullivan was a Queens native who understood the peculiar anonymity of urban life, how someone could vanish into the subway system and emerge anywhere in the 5 boroughs without leaving a meaningful trail. The city swallowed people daily, not through malice but through sheer overwhelming complexity. Carol Williams had become one of approximately 2,300 missing person reports filed in New York City that year, a statistic that reflected the department's limited resources more than their commitment to finding everyone who disappeared. The initial canvass of Carol's route to the subway station revealed the fundamental challenge of urban police work in the early 1990s. Roosevelt Avenue bustled with activity during morning rush hour, but that activity created a paradoxical invisibility. Dozens of shop owners, commuters, and residents might have seen Carol walking toward the station, but none of them had reason to pay particular attention to one more woman in scrubs heading to work. The human mind filters out the unremarkable, and Carol's morning walk had been designed to be as unremarkable as possible. Security cameras existed sporadically along Carol's route, primarily in banks and larger retail establishments, but the technology was primitive and the storage systems were temporary. Most businesses recorded over their footage every 24 to 48 hours, and by the time Sullivan began requesting surveillance materials, several crucial days had already passed. The few cameras that had captured anything useful showed grainy black and white images of sidewalk traffic that required enhancement equipment the precinct could not afford and expertise they did not possess. What made Carol's case different from the thousands of other missing person reports was not the circumstances of her disappearance, but the people who refused to let her become another forgotten statistic. Jennifer Williams, Carol's younger sister, drove through the night from Vermont after receiving Sarah's phone call, arriving at the apartment building at 2 a.m. to find the hallway still smelling faintly of Carol's floral shampoo, and the terrible silence that fills spaces where familiar voices should be. Jennifer Williams had been a third-grade teacher in Burlington, Vermont for 6 years when the phone call shattered her carefully ordered world. At 3:47 p.m. on October 16, 1993, Sarah Chen's voice crackled through her classroom's ancient phone system, each word dropping like stones into still water, creating ripples that would spread through Jennifer's life for decades to come. Carol was missing. Carol, who called every Sunday evening without fail, who sent birthday cards that arrived exactly 3 days early, who had never in her 30 years caused anyone a moment's genuine worry. The drive from Burlington to Queens took Jennifer 6 hours through autumn darkness, her hands gripping the steering wheel of her Honda Civic as she replayed every conversation she had had with Carol over the past month, searching for warning signs she might have missed. Carol had sounded tired during their last phone call, but she always sounded tired during flu season at the hospital. She had mentioned feeling watched while walking to work, but Jennifer had dismissed it as typical urban paranoia. Now every dismissed concern felt like a failure of sisterly intuition. Arriving at Carol's apartment building, Jennifer discovered a community she had never known existed. Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly woman who lived below Carol's apartment, emerged from her building with tears in her eyes and stories about how Carol had helped her carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs every week for 2 years. The bodega owner on Roosevelt Avenue remembered Carol buying the same breakfast every morning, always having exact change, always saying thank you in Spanish despite her obvious discomfort with the language. Each conversation revealed another facet of Carol's life that Jennifer had never fully understood. Her sister had not just been a nurse who happened to live in Queens. She had been woven into the fabric of a neighborhood, connected to dozens of people who noticed her absence like a missing note in a familiar song. The Korean family who ran the laundromat had expected Carol to pick up her dry cleaning on Friday. The pharmacist at Duane Reade had Carol's monthly prescription ready and waiting. Even the subway token booth clerk recognized Carol's photo and remembered her consistent morning commute. Jennifer began what would become the most important campaign of her life, starting at Kinko's on Northern Boulevard, spending her meager teacher's salary on photocopying 500 flyers featuring Carol's nursing school graduation photo, and the stark black letters of missing across the top. The young man operating the copy machine handled the flyers with the casual efficiency of someone who printed missing person posters regularly, as if human disappearances were as routine as birthday party invitations. Walking the streets of Queens with a stack of flyers and a roll of tape, Jennifer discovered that finding a missing person required not just determination, but a willingness to transform private grief into public advocacy. She taped Carol's photo to telephone poles, subway station walls, and community bulletin boards, each placement an act of faith that someone somewhere had seen something that could bring her sister home. The alliance between Jennifer and Carol's neighbors grew stronger as days passed without answers from the authorities. Mrs. Rodriguez organized a prayer circle that met every Tuesday evening in the building's courtyard. The bodega owner Hector Morales refused to remove Carol's missing poster from his window even after newer ones had covered it completely. These small acts of defiance against forgetting became the foundation of a community determined to remember Carol Williams long after the police had moved on to more pressing cases. Detective Sullivan interviewed Jennifer on October 20th in the fluorescent-lit interview room at the 108th Precinct, taking careful notes as she described Carol's personality, her relationships, and the absolute impossibility that she would simply walk away from her life without explanation. Jennifer's answers painted a picture of a woman so embedded in routine that her absence felt like a violation of natural law. But Sullivan had heard similar descriptions before from family members who discovered they knew far less about their loved ones than they had assumed. The investigation followed standard protocols, examining Carol's financial records, checking for unusual activity in her bank account or credit card usage that might indicate whether she had left voluntarily or been taken against her will. Carol's accounts remained untouched, her last transaction a $20 withdrawal from an aunt near her apartment on October 14th, the day before she disappeared. The money had been used for her usual weekly expenses, groceries, laundry, and subway tokens, suggesting no unusual plans or preparations for extended absence. Carol's colleagues at Mount Sinai painted a consistent portrait of professional competence and personal reserve. She was well-liked but not particularly social, rarely participating in after-work activities or hospital social events. Her supervisor, Margaret Torres, described Carol as someone who maintained clear boundaries between her professional and personal life, arriving at work prepared and focused, leaving promptly at the end of her shift without lingering for gossip or socializing. The few men Carol had dated over the past 2 years were interviewed and cleared of involvement in her disappearance. Each relationship had ended amicably with no suggestion of stalking, harassment, or threatening behavior. Carol appeared to have been genuinely unattached at the time of her disappearance, without romantic complications that might have motivated violence or abduction. By November 1st, 2 weeks after Carol's disappearance, the initial momentum of the investigation had begun to slow. Sullivan continued making calls and following up on tips, but the city's relentless pace demanded his attention elsewhere, toward cases with witnesses and evidence and the possibility of closure. The few leads that had emerged proved to be false alarms, mistaken identity cases involving women who resembled Carol, or sightings reported by well-meaning strangers whose descriptions never quite matched the missing nurse's distinctive features. Jennifer took unpaid leave from her teaching position and moved into Carol's apartment, temporarily transforming the living room into a command center for the search. Maps of Queens covered the walls, marked with colored pins indicating where witnesses claimed to have seen Carol or someone matching her description. Phone logs documented every tip, every lead, every dead end. The apartment became a shrine to methodical hope, to the belief that enough determination could overcome institutional indifference and bring Carol home. 3 weeks after Carol Williams disappeared, Detective Mike Sullivan sat in his car outside the Roosevelt Avenue subway station, watching the morning rush hour flow with the same relentless rhythm that had carried Carol into oblivion. Sullivan had worked missing person cases for 8 years, long enough to recognize the difference between investigations that would find resolution and those that would fade into the cold case files that filled basement storage rooms at precincts throughout the city. Carol's case possessed all the elements that made urban disappearances nearly impossible to solve: no witnesses to an actual crime, no evidence of struggle or violence, no unusual behavior in the days leading up to her vanishing. Just a reliable woman who had walked 8 blocks to catch a train and never arrived at her destination. The investigation had followed every protocol, interviewed every potential witness, and examined every piece of physical evidence, yet produced nothing that pointed toward a specific suspect or location. The security camera footage from businesses along Carol's route had yielded frustratingly little useful information. The few clear images showed Carol walking with her usual purposeful stride, carrying her familiar burgundy purse, and wearing the navy blue coat she had put on that morning. But the cameras had captured nothing unusual, no one following her, no signs of distress or deviation from her normal routine. She had simply walked toward the subway station and vanished into the urban anonymity that swallowed thousands of commuters every morning. Sullivan's partner, Detective Rosa Martinez, brought a different perspective to the investigation, shaped by her background in domestic violence cases. She pushed for deeper examination of Carol's personal relationships, particularly focusing on any men who might have had access to her schedule or her routines. But the interviews with Carol's co-workers, neighbors, and casual acquaintances yielded the same consistent portrait: a professional private woman without obvious enemies or complicated romantic entanglements. The building where Carol lived became a focal point of the investigation, not because of any specific evidence, but because it represented the last place where her movements could be documented with certainty. Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly tenant who lived below Carol's apartment, provided the most detailed account of Carol's final morning, describing the familiar sounds of her upstairs neighbor preparing for work, the shower running for exactly 12 minutes, the footsteps padding across the hardwood floor, the careful closing of the apartment door. Harold Brennan, the building's superintendent, had been working in the position for 6 years, when Carol disappeared, responsible for maintenance, repairs, and the general oversight of a 40-unit building that housed primarily young professionals attracted by affordable rent and convenient subway access. Brennan lived in a basement apartment that came with his job arrangement that allowed him to respond to tenant emergencies, while providing housing that he could not have afforded on his maintenance worker's salary. When Detective Sullivan interviewed Brennan on October 28, the superintendent appeared cooperative and appropriately concerned about Carol's disappearance. He described her as a quiet, reliable tenant who never caused problems or made unreasonable maintenance requests. Brennan claimed to have seen Carol leave the building on the morning of October 15 around her usual time, but admitted that he had not paid particular attention since her routine was so predictable. What Sullivan did not know was that Brennan had been documenting Carol's movements with obsessive attention for months before her disappearance, using his position as building superintendent to study her schedule, learn her habits, and gain access to her apartment when she was at work. The maintenance requests that had required him to enter Carol's apartment had been fabricated excuses to photograph her belongings, study her personal effects, and feed an escalating obsession that had transformed from surveillance into something far more dangerous. The investigation faced the fundamental challenge of 1990s police work: limited technology, insufficient resources, and the overwhelming volume of cases that prevented thorough follow-up on marginal leads. Sullivan's caseload included 2 active homicides, a series of armed robberies, and the daily chaos of Queens criminal activity. Carol's disappearance, while personally troubling to those who knew her, was just one of dozens of active investigations competing for his attention. Jennifer Williams continued her grassroots search effort despite growing frustration with official law enforcement response. She had organized volunteer search parties that combed through parks, vacant lots, and abandoned buildings within a 10-mile radius of Carol's apartment building. The searches yielded nothing, but they served an important psychological function for Carol's friends and neighbors, who needed to feel they were doing something constructive, rather than simply waiting for answers that might never come. The media coverage of Carol's disappearance followed the predictable pattern of local news stories. Initial reporting focused on the mystery of a reliable nurse who had vanished without explanation, followed by follow-up pieces that gradually decreased in frequency as other stories demanded attention. Carol's case lacked the dramatic elements that sustained public interest: no evidence of foul play, no wealthy family offering large rewards, no unusual circumstances that would capture viewers' imagination beyond the initial shock of ordinary life interrupted. By December 1st, 6 weeks after Carol's disappearance, the active investigation had essentially stalled. Sullivan continued making calls and following up on tips, but the leads had dried up and the trail had grown cold. Carol's case file now included hundreds of pages of witness statements, forensic reports, and dead-end leads, but no breakthrough that would transform a missing person report into a solvable case. The psychological toll on Carol's family and friends had become the investigation's most visible consequence. Jennifer had returned to Vermont in late November, but continued making weekly trips to Queens, each visit shorter and more hopeless than the last. Sarah Chen had begun the process of looking for a new roommate, unable to afford the apartment alone, but also unable to pack away Carol's belongings, which remained exactly as she had left them. The community that had rallied around Carol's disappearance began to fracture under the weight of unanswered questions. Some neighbors continued to believe that Carol would eventually return, that some reasonable explanation would emerge for her absence. Others began to accept the possibility that she had been the victim of random violence, that her body might never be found and her killer might never be identified. By January 1994, 3 months after Carol Williams disappeared, her case had migrated from active investigation to cold case status, joining thousands of similar files in the basement archives of the 108th Precinct. Detective Mike Sullivan cleaned out his desk and prepared for retirement after 22 years of police work, packing his career into cardboard boxes that could not contain the weight of unfinished business. Carol's case file occupied a full drawer in the precinct's filing system, expanded to include witness statements, forensic reports, evidence bags, and dead-end leads that represented hundreds of hours of investigative work, but no answers for the family members who called monthly asking whether any progress had been made. The file would remain technically active, meaning that new leads would be investigated, but practically dormant, lacking the resources necessary for meaningful advancement. Detective Anthony Ritchie inherited Carol's case, along with 14 other missing person investigations, when he took over Sullivan's caseload in February 1994. During their transition meeting, Sullivan spent less than 10 minutes summarizing Carol's disappearance, acknowledging with the weary honesty of a career police officer that the case had grown cold beyond the reach of conventional investigation. Ritchie approached Carol's case with fresh eyes but limited time. His workload included 2 ongoing homicides, a series of armed robberies, and the daily chaos of Queens criminal activity that demanded immediate attention. Missing person cases, especially those involving adults with no obvious signs of foul play, received minimal resources and were often handled by detectives juggling multiple investigations simultaneously. Jennifer Williams' annual phone calls to the precinct became shorter and more ritualistic over time. Each January, she would call Detective Ritchie to ask whether any new leads had emerged, whether any similar cases had been solved, whether advancing forensic technology might shed new light on Carol's disappearance. Ritchie always promised to call if anything developed, and Jennifer always thanked him with the polite desperation of someone who knew she was asking the impossible, but could not stop herself from asking. Sarah Chen moved out of the shared apartment in March 1995, unable to bear the daily reminders of her missing roommate, but also unable to pack away Carol's belongings. The bedroom remained exactly as Carol had left it, a museum of interrupted routine that Sarah visited twice a week to water the small plant on Carol's windowsill and to sit quietly among the remnants of a life that had simply stopped. The community that had formed around Carol's disappearance gradually dispersed as people returned to their own concerns, though traces of her presence lingered in unexpected places. Mrs. Rodriguez continued setting aside Carol's mail, creating neat stacks of catalogs and bills that no one would ever claim. Hector Morales kept Carol's missing poster in his bodega window until it faded to ghostly illegibility, replaced periodically with fresh copies that Jennifer brought during her visits. Harold Brennan, the building superintendent, who had been systematically stalking Carol for months. Before her disappearance, continued his maintenance duties with the same outward competence that had allowed him to hide his obsessive behavior for years. The basement apartment where he lived became a shrine to his crimes, filled with photographs, personal items, and detailed journals documenting his surveillance of female tenants who never realized they were being watched by someone with keys to their homes. Brennan's pattern of predatory behavior extended far beyond Carol Williams, though her murder marked an escalation from voyeurism and stalking to actual violence. Over the 6 years he had worked as building superintendent, Brennan had systematically violated the privacy and safety of dozens of women, using his position to enter their apartments, photograph their belongings, and study their personal habits with the obsessive attention to detail that would have impressed investigators if they had known to look for it. The investigation faced insurmountable obstacles that would persist for decades: limited technology, insufficient resources, and the institutional tendency to treat missing adult cases as lower priority compared to homicides and violent crimes with clear evidence of criminal activity. Carol's disappearance lacked the dramatic elements that sustained police attention: no witnesses to an actual crime, no evidence of struggle, no unusual circumstances that would justify extensive resource allocation. Advances in forensic science during the 1990s offered theoretical possibilities for solving cold cases like Carol's, but the practical application of new technologies required funding, equipment, and expertise that most local police departments could not afford. DNA analysis existed but was expensive and time-consuming. Most security camera systems still used analog technology that produced poor quality images, and computerized databases were primitive compared to the digital resources that would become available decades later. Jennifer Williams attempted to hire private investigators, using her teacher's salary to fund efforts that official law enforcement could not or would not pursue, but private investigation services were expensive and their access to official records and forensic resources was limited. The few leads they developed proved to be false alarms, cases of mistaken identity, or well-meaning but inaccurate witness accounts that led nowhere. By 2007, years after Carol Williams disappeared, Jennifer had begun the painful process of accepting that her sister might never be found, that some mysteries were too deep for resolution, and some losses too complete for healing. The annual pilgrimage to Queens continued but evolved from desperate searching into something closer to memorial observance, a ritual of remembrance that honored Carol's life while acknowledging the impossibility of bringing her home. The case that had consumed Jennifer Williams' life for over a decade gradually faded from public attention, though it never completely disappeared from the consciousness of those who had known Carol personally. Her colleagues at Mount Sinai Hospital occasionally mentioned her during staff meetings, wondering aloud what had happened to the reliable nurse who had vanished without explanation. Neighbors in her building sometimes asked new tenants whether they had heard about the woman who had disappeared from the 3rd floor. Harold Brennan had perfected the art of invisibility long before he began stalking Carol Williams. His position as building superintendent provided the perfect cover for predatory behavior, allowing him to move through tenants' lives with keys that opened every door and master knowledge of their schedules, their habits, and their vulnerabilities. What made Brennan particularly dangerous was not just his access but his patience, his willingness to study his victims for months before escalating to more invasive forms of violation. The basement apartment where Brennan lived had been converted from building storage space sometime in the 1970s, featuring low ceilings, inadequate lighting, and the persistent dampness that characterized below-ground New York housing. But Brennan had transformed the space into something far more sinister than simple living quarters. Behind a false wall that he had constructed with meticulous care lay a hidden room that served as both shrine and command center for his obsessive surveillance of female tenants. Carol's burgundy leather purse occupied a place of honor on wooden shelving that Brennan had built specifically to display trophies from his crimes. Inside the purse, investigators would eventually find Carol's Metro card, still loaded with exactly 1 week's worth of unused rides, her reading glasses in their blue felt case, and the small notebook where she had written grocery lists in handwriting that had been preserved like evidence in a murder trial. The hidden room contained dozens of photographs that Brennan had taken without Carol's knowledge, documenting her daily routines with the thoroughness of a surveillance operation. Images of Carol leaving the building, entering the subway station, walking through hospital corridors, even sleeping in her apartment, taken through windows or with telephoto lenses that he had purchased specifically for stalking purposes. Each photograph was labeled with dates and times, creating a chronological record of predation that had continued for months before Carol's disappearance. More disturbing were the detailed journals that Brennan had kept, written in neat handwriting that transformed criminal behavior into romantic fantasy. He described following Carol to work, timing her movements, learning her preferences and patterns, until he knew her schedule better than she did. The journals revealed that Brennan had entered Carol's apartment multiple times, using his master key to photograph her belongings and document intimate details of her private life. Brennan had stolen personal items from Carol's apartment with the systematic approach of someone collecting evidence rather than trophies. A pillowcase that still carried traces of her shampoo, prescription bottles with her name and dosage information, even kitchen utensils that he had apparently taken as physical connections to someone whose life he had been studying with obsessive intensity. Each stolen object had been catalogued and preserved, creating a twisted archive of someone's interrupted existence. The scope of Brennan's crimes extended far beyond Carol Williams. The hidden room contained similar collections for other women who had lived in buildings where he had worked, suggesting that Carol's murder was part of a pattern of escalating obsession that had consumed his life for decades. Photographs and personal items belonging to at least 12 different women filled the space, some dating back to the 1980s, others as recent as the early 1990s. What made Brennan's predatory behavior particularly insidious was his ability to maintain the facade of professional competence while conducting systematic violations of tenant privacy and safety. His employment records showed consistent positive evaluations from building management companies, who praised his reliability, attention to detail, and willingness to work irregular hours. None of his supervisors recognized the warning signs that would have been obvious if viewed collectively rather than individually. Tenant complaints about Brennan had been handled through informal channels that left no paper trail. Women who felt uncomfortable with his behavior or reported inappropriate conduct were often told to avoid being alone with him, rather than having their concerns investigated through official channels. The fragmented nature of complaint handling meant that no one recognized the pattern of predatory behavior that became obvious when examined comprehensively decades later. Brennan's method of selecting victims followed predictable patterns. He targeted women who lived alone, worked regular schedules, and appeared to have limited social connections that might notice their absence or unusual behavior. Carol Williams fit his preferred victim profile perfectly: a single professional woman whose routine was predictable, and whose disappearance might be attributed to personal choice rather than criminal violence. The morning of October 15, 1993 marked the culmination of Brennan's months-long stalking campaign against Carol Williams. He had followed her previous mornings, studying her route, timing her movements, and identifying locations where he could approach her without witnesses. The confrontation that led to Carol's murder occurred in the narrow alley between her building and Roosevelt Avenue, a location that Brennan had chosen specifically because it offered both privacy and easy access to disposal routes. Brennan's confession years later would reveal the calculated nature of Carol's murder, describing how he had approached her under the pretense of building maintenance issues, demanding that she acknowledge what he perceived as their relationship. When Carol attempted to escape, Brennan killed her with the methodical efficiency of someone who had been planning the act for months, then disposed of her body using knowledge of Queens geography that he had gained through years of working maintenance jobs throughout the borough. The investigation that followed Carol's disappearance never identified Brennan as a suspect despite multiple opportunities to uncover his predatory behavior. His position as building superintendent made him a natural witness, rather than a potential perpetrator, and his carefully constructed facade of professional competence deflected suspicion that might have led to deeper scrutiny of his activities. Brennan's ability to evade detection for decades reflected systemic failures in how building management companies screened employees, handled tenant complaints, and coordinated with law enforcement agencies. His criminal behavior was enabled by institutional indifference to women's safety concerns, and the assumption that building superintendents posed no threat to the people whose homes they had unlimited access to. The evidence that would eventually expose Brennan had been hidden in his basement apartment for 25 years, waiting for advances in forensic technology and investigative techniques that would allow cold case detectives to recognize patterns that had been invisible to investigators in the 1990s. His crimes represented not just individual acts of violence, but systemic failures that had allowed a predator to operate with impunity for decades. 25 years after Carol Williams vanished from Roosevelt Avenue, a routine digitization project at the 108th Precinct breathed unexpected life into dozens of cold cases that had been gathering dust in basement storage rooms. Detective Maria Santos, newly assigned to the precinct's cold case unit, had volunteered to oversee the conversion of old evidence to digital format. Understanding that most cold cases never receive the resources necessary for meaningful progress, but hoping that modern technology might reveal connections that had been invisible to earlier investigators, Santos spent her days hunched over scanning equipment in a windowless room, processing cases that had defeated some of the department's best investigators. Each file represented someone's worst nightmare, someone's missing piece, but the sheer volume of unresolved cases made individual tragedies blur together into an overwhelming tapestry of human loss. Carol Williams' file arrived on Santos' desk on a Tuesday morning in March 2018, distinguished from hundreds of others only by its thickness and the meticulous organization that suggested someone had cared deeply about finding answers. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a small cardboard box labeled miscellaneous video evidence property of Estrella Bodega that had been stored with Carol's file but never properly processed. Inside, Santos discovered 3 VIS tapes with handwritten dates spanning October 12 through 16, 1993, along with a brief note from the original investigating officer, explaining that the bodega owner had provided security footage, but that viewing equipment had been unavailable at the time of the investigation. Santos requisitioned an ancient VIS player from the precinct's evidence room and spent her lunch break watching grainy black and white footage of Roosevelt Avenue sidewalk traffic from 25 years earlier. The quality was terrible, the timestamp barely legible. But the footage captured something that had been overlooked for a quarter century. Clear images of Carol Williams walking past the bodega at 6 a.m. on October 15, 1993, her burgundy purse visible against her dark coat, her stride confident and purposeful. But Santos noticed something else that made her replay the footage repeatedly, adjusting contrast and brightness settings to enhance the images. 20 feet behind Carol, maintaining a consistent distance, walked a tall figure in a dark jacket, someone whose body language suggested deliberate surveillance rather than coincidental travel. The figure stayed far enough back to avoid drawing attention, but close enough to maintain visual contact, matching Carol's pace when she slowed down and quickening when she moved faster. The discovery sent Santos digging deeper into the original investigation files, searching for any mention of surveillance or stalking that might have been dismissed as paranoia. She found Jennifer Williams' witness statement from 1993, which included a passing reference to Carol feeling watched during her morning commute, a concern that had been noted but never thoroughly investigated. Santos also discovered interview notes with Carol's neighbors mentioning a man they had seen loitering near their building's entrance, always during hours when Carol would be leaving for work. Enhancement technology available in 2018 revealed details that had been impossible to discern in 1993. The stalker appeared to be a white male, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing what looked like building maintenance clothing and work boots. Most significantly, he carried keys that were visible when he raised his hand to check his watch, suggesting he had legitimate access to buildings in the area. Santos began cross-referencing building employee records with the original witness statements, looking for patterns that had been missed during the initial investigation. The digitized footage became the foundation for reopening Carol Williams' case after 25 years of silence. Santos submitted paperwork to reactivate the investigation, knowing that cold cases rarely yielded dramatic breakthroughs, but understanding that advances in forensic technology sometimes revealed evidence that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. The enhanced security footage provided Santos with the first concrete lead in Carol's case since 1993, but it also raised disturbing questions about how many other women might have been stalked by someone with access to their buildings, their schedules, and their personal information. The investigation was no longer about one missing nurse, but about a predator who had been hiding in maintenance rooms and basement apartments, using his position to study and terrorize women who trusted him with keys to their homes. Santos spent weeks reviewing employment records for building maintenance workers who had been active in Queens during the early 1990s, cross-referencing their work histories with tenant complaints and police reports that might indicate patterns of inappropriate behavior. The process was tedious and often frustrating, but it reflected the methodical approach that cold case investigations required, the willingness to examine evidence that earlier investigators had not recognized as significant. Harold Brennan name emerged from Santos' research as someone who had worked as building superintendent at Carol's apartment building during the relevant time period, but his employment record appeared unremarkable: positive evaluations from supervisors, steady work history, and no obvious red flags that would have attracted police attention during the original investigation. What made Brennan interesting was not what appeared in his official record, but what was missing from it. Tenant complaint records that should have been maintained by building management companies were either missing, or had been handled through informal channels that left no paper trail. Several women who had lived in buildings where Brennan worked had moved out early, breaking their leases despite significant financial penalties, but their reasons for leaving had never been documented or investigated comprehensively. Santos began tracking Brennan through property management records and employment databases, discovering that he had continued working as building superintendent for various companies throughout Queens and Brooklyn, never staying in one position for more than 2 years. Each job change seemed to coincide with tenant complaints or management concerns, but the complaints had never been serious enough to warrant police involvement or comprehensive background checks. The trail led Santos to a large apartment complex in Astoria where Brennan had been working as maintenance supervisor since 2015, living alone in a basement apartment that came with his job. When Santos conducted surveillance of the building, she observed Brennan watching female tenants with the same calculating attention that had been captured in the 1993 security footage, maintaining careful distance while tracking their movements with predatory focus. Interviews with current tenants revealed familiar patterns of complaints about Brennan: maintenance requests that required multiple visits, unexpected appearances in common areas, and an uncomfortable sense of being watched that tenants attributed to urban paranoia rather than specific threats. The similarity to complaints from 1993 suggested that Brennan had been conducting the same predatory behavior for over 25 years, using his position as building superintendent to stalk women who never realized they were being hunted. Santos began building a comprehensive case against Brennan, understanding that 25-year-old evidence would require corroboration from multiple sources to be admissible in court. She coordinated with the district attorney's office to prepare search warrants that would allow investigators to examine Brennan's current residence and any evidence that might connect him to Carol's disappearance and potentially other crimes against women he had encountered through his work. The search warrant for Harold Brennan's basement apartment arrived on Detective Maria Santos' desk at 6 a.m. on November 15, 2018. Signed by a judge who had reviewed 25 years of circumstantial evidence and found probable cause in the accumulated weight of surveillance footage, tenant complaints, and behavioral patterns that painted a picture of predatory obsession. Santos had requested the warrant, knowing that cold cases rarely yielded physical evidence after decades of concealment, but understanding that some investigations require leaps of faith backed by methodical preparation. Brennan's apartment occupied the lowest level of a pre-war building in Astoria, accessible through a separate entrance that allowed him to come and go without encountering tenants or management. The basement space had been converted into living quarters sometime in the 1970s, featuring low ceilings, inadequate lighting, and the persistent dampness that characterized below-ground New York housing. When Santos descended the narrow staircase with the search team, she immediately noticed the institutional cleanliness that suggested someone who had spent years perfecting the art of leaving no traces. The living area appeared almost monastic in its simplicity: a single bed with military-precise corners, a small television tuned to local news, a kitchenette equipped with the minimum necessary appliances. Everything was organized with the obsessive attention to detail that Santos had learned to associate with individuals who lived double lives, who maintained normal facades while harboring secrets that required constant vigilance to protect. But the apartment's main room was a carefully constructed performance of normality. The real discoveries waited behind a false wall that the search team located using ground-penetrating radar equipment, a hidden space that Brennan had constructed with the same methodical patience that had characterized his decades of stalking. When crime scene technicians removed the drywall panels, they found a shrine to obsession that had been growing in darkness for 25 years. Carol Williams' burgundy leather purse sat on wooden shelving like a museum piece, its brass clasp still bright despite the passage of time. Inside, Santos found Carol's Metro card with exactly 1 week's worth of unused rides, her reading glasses in their blue felt case, and the small notebook where she had written grocery lists in handwriting that Santos recognized from witness statements collected decades earlier. The purse contained Carol's entire identity, preserved with the reverence of someone who had studied every detail of her life. The hidden room contained dozens of photographs that Brennan had taken without Carol's knowledge, documenting her daily routines with the thoroughness of a surveillance operation. Images of Carol leaving her building, entering the subway station, walking through hospital corridors, even sleeping in her apartment, taken through windows or with telephoto lenses. Each photograph was labeled with dates and times, creating a chronological record of stalking that had continued for months before Carol's disappearance. More disturbing were the journals that Brennan had kept, detailed accounts of his observations written in neat handwriting that transformed predatory behavior into romantic fantasy. He described following Carol to work, timing her movements, learning her preferences and patterns until he knew her schedule better than she did. The journals revealed that Brennan had entered Carol's apartment multiple times, using his master key, photographing her belongings and documenting intimate details of her private life. Santos' team found items that could only have come from Carol's apartment: a pillowcase that still carried traces of her shampoo, prescription bottles with her name and dosage information, even kitchen utensils that Brennan had apparently taken as trophies. Each stolen object had been cataloged and preserved, creating a twisted archive of someone's interrupted existence. The evidence represented not just proof of crime, but documentation of obsession that had consumed Brennan's life for decades. The search team discovered similar collections for other women who had lived in buildings where Brennan had worked, suggesting that Carol's murder was part of a pattern of escalating obsession. Photographs and personal items belonging to at least 12 different women filled the hidden room, some dating back to the 1980s, others as recent as 2017. Brennan had been conducting systematic reconnaissance operations, using his position as building superintendent to identify and study potential victims. Harold Brennan's arrest took place at 5 a.m. on November 20, 2018. As he emerged from his basement apartment to begin another day of maintaining the building, where he had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. Detective Santos had coordinated the timing with precision, knowing that predators like Brennan were most vulnerable during routine moments when their guard was down. The arrest happened quietly, without dramatic confrontation, just handcuffs and Miranda rights delivered in the gray dawn light of Queens. Brennan's first words when confronted with evidence of his crimes were not denials or demands for lawyers, but a quiet acknowledgement that he had been expecting this moment for 25 years. His confession came during the third interview with investigators, delivered with the detached precision of someone describing a maintenance procedure rather than admitting to murder. He explained that he had confronted Carol on the morning of October 15, 1993, demanding that she acknowledge the relationship that existed only in his twisted imagination. When Carol attempted to escape, Brennan had killed her in what he described as a moment of frustration rather than rage, then disposed of her body in a location that he refused to reveal, even during plea negotiations. His detailed knowledge of Queens geography, gained through years of maintenance work, had provided him with numerous options for concealing evidence, but he maintained that Carol's remains would never be found, despite intensive efforts by search teams. Jennifer Williams received the phone call she had been waiting 25 years to hear at 7 a.m., while preparing breakfast in her Burlington kitchen. Santos' voice carried across the phone line with careful professionalism, explaining that they had arrested a suspect in Carol's disappearance and found evidence that proved her sister had been the victim of a predatory stalker who had escalated from surveillance to murder. The media coverage of Brennan's arrest sent shock waves through Queens neighborhoods where he had worked, as residents realized they had been living above a predator who had used his position to study and stalk women for over 30 years. Building management companies began reviewing their hiring practices and tenant complaint procedures, understanding too late that their negligence had enabled decades of criminal behavior. Sarah Chen, now 53 and living in California, watched the news coverage with a mixture of vindication and horror. She had moved across the country partly to escape the lingering trauma of Carol's disappearance, but also because she had never felt safe in New York, after realizing that her roommate had been hunted by someone who had keys to their apartment. The arrest validated instincts she had tried to suppress, fears that police had dismissed as paranoia rather than legitimate concerns about building security. The courtroom where Harold Brennan faced charges for Carol Williams' murder filled with representatives from multiple communities affected by his decades of predatory behavior. Jennifer Williams sat in the front row, surrounded by former tenants who had lived in buildings where Brennan worked. Women who had endured his surveillance and harassment without understanding that they were being stalked by someone who had already committed murder. Their collective presence transformed the trial from an individual case into a broader reckoning with institutional failures that had enabled his crimes. Prosecutor Janet Rodriguez had built her case on 25 years of accumulated evidence, understanding that proving Brennan's guilt would require demonstrating not just his connection to Carol's disappearance, but the systematic pattern of predatory behavior that had culminated in murder. The physical evidence from Brennan's hidden room provided compelling proof of his obsession with Carol. But the legal challenge lay in connecting that obsession to her death without a body or witnesses to the actual crime. Brennan's defense attorney faced the impossible task of explaining away a basement shrine filled with stolen personal items, detailed surveillance photographs, and journals documenting months of stalking behavior. The evidence was so overwhelming that the defense strategy focused on mental health claims, arguing that Brennan suffered from psychological disorders that diminished his responsibility for criminal actions. The trial lasted 6 weeks, with testimony from dozens of witnesses who described Brennan's inappropriate behavior spanning 3 decades. Former tenants testified about feeling watched, entering their apartments to find furniture moved or personal items missing, maintenance requests that seemed designed to provide Brennan with access rather than address legitimate building issues. Each witness added another layer to the portrait of a predator who had used his position to violate women's safety and privacy. Jennifer Williams' victim impact statement focused on the human cost of 25 years spent wondering whether her sister was alive, somewhere hoping for phone calls that would never come. She spoke about birthdays celebrated in Carol's absence, holidays marked by empty chairs, and the peculiar grief of losing someone without being able to bury them. Her words carried the weight of a quarter-century spent in limbo, waiting for answers that had been hiding in a basement apartment just miles from where Carol had disappeared. Detective Maria Santos testified about the breakthrough that had led to reopening Carol's case, describing how advances in digital technology had revealed evidence that had been overlooked for decades. Her methodical approach to cold case investigation had uncovered patterns that earlier investigators missed, not through any fault of their own, but because the tools and techniques necessary to recognize those patterns had not existed in 1993. The prosecution presented evidence of Brennan's escalating behavior, showing how his crimes had progressed from voyeurism to theft to stalking and finally to murder. Expert witnesses explained the psychology of predatory behavior, describing how individuals like Brennan often begin with minor violations that provide them with a sense of power and control over their victims, gradually escalating to more serious crimes as their obsessions intensify. Brennan's confession played a central role in the prosecution's case, though his refusal to reveal the location of Carol's remains added an element of cruelty that affected everyone in the courtroom. He described confronting Carol on the morning of October 15, 1993 near her apartment building, demanding that she acknowledge what he perceived as their relationship. When she attempted to escape, he had killed her, then used his knowledge of Queens geography to dispose of her body in a location that searchers had never discovered. The defense attempted to portray Brennan as someone suffering from mental illness, whose crimes were the result of psychological disorders rather than criminal intent. But the systematic nature of his predatory behavior, the careful planning evident in his stalking activities, and the construction of the hidden room where he preserved trophies from his crimes contradicted any suggestion that his actions were impulsive or uncontrolled. Witness testimony revealed the scope of Brennan's victims, extending far beyond Carol Williams to include dozens of women who had lived in buildings where he worked over 3 decades. Many described years of feeling unsafe in their own homes, experiencing unexplained anxiety that they had attributed to urban life rather than specific threats. The psychological impact of his crimes had affected entire communities, creating ripple effects that extended far beyond individual victims. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning guilty verdicts on all charges, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, stalking, and multiple counts of burglary related to his unauthorized entries into tenant apartments. The verdict brought a measure of justice for Carol Williams and validation for the women, whose complaints about Brennan had been dismissed or ignored for decades. Brennan's sentencing hearing lasted 2 days, with victim impact statements from women whose lives had been damaged by his predatory attention. Many described the long-term psychological effects of living under surveillance by someone they had trusted with access to their homes. The institutional failures that had enabled Brennan's crimes became a central theme, as speaker after speaker described how their concerns had been minimized or dismissed by building management and law enforcement. Judge Patricia Harrison sentenced Brennan to life in prison without the possibility of parole, acknowledging that while the sentence could not restore the years stolen from his victims, it would ensure that he could never again use a position of trust to prey upon vulnerable women. The courtroom erupted in applause when the sentence was announced, though the satisfaction was tempered by the knowledge that Carol's remains might never be found. Jennifer Williams spoke to reporters outside the courthouse, expressing gratitude for the persistence of Detective Santos and the cold case unit, while acknowledging that the trial represented both an ending and a beginning, the end of 25 years of wondering what had happened to her sister, but the beginning of a different kind of grief, now that she knew Carol would never come home. The Brennan case became a catalyst for changes in how building management companies screen employees, handle tenant complaints, and coordinate with law enforcement agencies. New protocols required background checks for all employees with access to tenant apartments, documented complaint procedures, and regular communication with local police departments about security concerns. Harold Brennan's life sentence brought a measure of closure to Carol Williams' case, but it also opened new investigations into unsolved disappearances and missing person cases involving women who had lived in buildings where Brennan worked over his 30-year career. Detective Maria Santos found herself coordinating with law enforcement agencies throughout New York City as they re-examined cold cases that might be connected to the predator who had hidden in basement apartments and maintenance rooms. The breakthrough in Carol's case demonstrated the importance of preserving evidence, even when initial investigations reached dead ends. The Vaz tapes that had been stored in evidence boxes for 25 years became the key to solving not just one murder, but exposing a pattern of criminal behavior that had affected dozens of victims. Technology that had been unavailable to investigators in 1993 finally revealed connections that had been invisible for decades. Jennifer Williams established the Carol Williams Cold Case Foundation, using donations from supporters who had followed the investigation through media coverage. The foundation provided funding for law enforcement agencies to digitize old evidence and apply modern forensic techniques to unsolved cases, particularly those involving missing women whose disappearances had been attributed to personal choice rather than criminal violence. The foundation also advocated for changes in how building management companies handled tenant safety concerns, requiring documented complaint procedures, regular background checks for employees with building access, and coordination with local law enforcement when patterns of inappropriate behavior emerged. Jennifer transformed her personal tragedy into a tool for preventing similar crimes and supporting other families searching for missing loved ones. Sarah Chen returned to New York for Brennan's sentencing, after 25 years of living across the country to escape memories of her missing roommate. Seeing Brennan in handcuffs provided validation for instincts she had questioned for decades: the feeling of being watched, the sense that someone had been in their apartment during Carol's absence. The fear that had driven her to move across the country had been justified by evidence that police had finally uncovered. The impact of Brennan case extended beyond criminal justice to influence building management practices throughout New York City. Property owners began implementing enhanced security measures, including improved lighting in common areas, security cameras in hallways and laundry rooms, and stricter protocols for employee access to tenant apartments. The case became a cautionary tale about the importance of taking tenant safety concerns seriously. Detective Santos received recognition for her work on the Carol Williams case, but she emphasized that the breakthrough had been possible only because earlier investigators had preserved evidence properly and maintained detailed case files. The digitization project that led to discovering the overlooked security footage became a model for other police departments seeking to apply modern technology to cold cases. The search for Carol Williams remains continued, even after Brennan conviction. Teams of volunteers organized by Jennifer Williams Foundation conducted systematic searches of areas throughout Queens where Brennan might have disposed of the body, using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs to examine locations that matched his known movement patterns during the weeks following Carol's disappearance. Brennan refused to cooperate with efforts to locate Carol's remains, even after exhausting his appeals and accepting that he would spend the rest of his life in prison. His final act of cruelty was denying Carol's family the opportunity to lay her to rest properly, maintaining control over his victim even from behind bars. The refusal to reveal the burial location became part of his sentence impact, showing that his crimes extended beyond murder to include psychological torture of surviving family members. The Cold Case Unit at the 108th Precinct received additional funding and resources following the success of the Carol Williams investigation, allowing them to apply similar techniques to dozens of other unsolved cases. The digitization project that had begun as routine administrative work became a comprehensive effort to re-examine evidence using modern forensic methods. Mrs. Rodriguez, now in her 80s, still lived in the apartment below where Carol had disappeared. She followed the trial proceedings through daily newspaper coverage and felt vindicated that her concerns about the building's superintendent had finally been taken seriously. The elderly woman had maintained Carol's missing poster in her window for 25 years, replacing it when weather damage made it illegible. Hector Morales, who had kept Carol's photograph displayed in his bodega window throughout the decades, attended Brennan's sentencing hearing, representing the community that had refused to let Carol become another forgotten statistic. His commitment to remembering Carol's disappearance had helped maintain public attention during years when official investigation had stalled. The trial proceedings were documented by several journalists, who recognized the broader implications of Brennan's case for understanding how predators operate within institutional systems that provide them with access to vulnerable victims. The systematic failures that had enabled his crimes became the subject of investigative reporting that led to policy changes in building management and law enforcement. Carol Williams' case joined the ranks of solved cold cases that demonstrated the importance of persistence in criminal investigation and the potential for advances in technology to reveal evidence that had been overlooked for decades. The case became a teaching tool in criminal justice programs, illustrating how patient detective work combined with modern forensic techniques could bring justice, even after decades of unanswered questions. The foundation established in Carol's memory continued its work long after Brennan's conviction, providing resources for cold case investigations and supporting families of missing persons who faced the same institutional indifference that had characterized the initial response to Carol's disappearance. Jennifer Williams transformed her personal loss into a force for systemic change, ensuring that her sister's death would contribute to preventing similar tragedies. Brennan died in prison 3 years after his conviction, taking with him the secret location of Carol Williams' remains and denying her family the closure that comes with proper burial. His death marked the end of one chapter in Carol's story, but the beginning of another, as her memory lived on through the foundation that bore her name and the changes in law enforcement practices that her case had inspired. The basement shrine where Brennan had displayed his trophies was dismantled, and the evidence properly disposed of according to legal protocols. But the impact of what investigators had discovered in that hidden room continued to influence how law enforcement agencies approached cases involving predators who used positions of trust to access their victims. 5 years after Harold Brennan's conviction, the Carol Williams Cold Case Foundation had grown into one of the most respected victim advocacy organizations in the country, with chapters in 15 states and partnerships with law enforcement agencies, universities, and other nonprofit organizations focused on missing person cases. What began as Jennifer Williams' personal quest to find her sister had evolved into a systematic effort to address the institutional failures that allowed predators to operate with impunity. The foundation provided grants to police departments for evidence digitization projects that applied modern technology to old cases, funding advanced DNA analysis, genealogy research, and computer enhancement of surveillance footage that had been deemed unusable when originally collected. The Carol Williams model of cold case investigation had been adopted by agencies across the country, leading to the resolution of over 200 previously unsolved cases. Detective Maria Santos, who had reopened Carol's case, retired from active duty but continued working as a consultant for the foundation, training investigators in the techniques that had led to Brennan identification and arrest. Her methodical approach to examining old evidence with fresh eyes became a standard protocol for cold case units, while her emphasis on preserving evidence properly influenced how current investigations were documented and stored. The changes in building management practices inspired by Brennan's case had spread throughout the real estate industry, with property owners implementing enhanced background checks for employees, tenant complaint tracking systems, and coordination protocols with local law enforcement agencies. The case became required reading in property management training programs as an example of how institutional negligence could enable predatory behavior. Jennifer Williams had been recognized with numerous awards for her advocacy work, including the National Crime Victims' Rights Award and the Department of Justice's Outstanding Service Award. She had testified before Congress about the need for better resources for cold case investigations, and had worked with legislators to pass the Cold Case Investigation Enhancement Act, which provided federal funding for DNA analysis and advanced forensic techniques. The foundation established the Carol Williams Memorial Database, a comprehensive resource that tracked missing person cases involving women who had disappeared under similar circumstances. The database allowed investigators to identify patterns that might indicate serial predation, while providing families with resources and support during their search efforts. The database had been credited with identifying connections between cases that had previously been investigated in isolation. Sarah Chent, who had returned to New York after 25 years for Brennan trial, decided to stay in the city where she and Carol had shared an apartment. She established a support group for families of missing persons, providing counseling and advocacy services based on her own experience of living with uncertainty and institutional indifference. The group met weekly in a community center near the building where Carol had disappeared. The apartment building where Carol had lived underwent extensive renovations after Brennan conviction, with new owners implementing comprehensive security measures, including cameras in all common areas, electronic access systems, and 24-hour concierge service. The basement apartment where Brennan had lived was converted back to storage space, with the hidden room permanently sealed and documented as part of the building's historical record. Mrs. Rodriguez, now in her late 80s, had become something of a neighborhood celebrity after her testimony during Brennan trial. Her willingness to speak about the concerns she had raised decades earlier inspired other elderly residents to report suspicious behavior, rather than assuming that their observations were unimportant. Community groups organized around tenant safety began meeting regularly in buildings throughout Queens. Hector Morales, who had maintained Carol's missing poster in his bodega window for 25 years, established a memorial scholarship in her name for young women pursuing careers in healthcare. The scholarship was funded through donations from customers who had followed Carol's story over the decades and wanted to honor her memory by supporting others who shared her commitment to helping people. The impact of Carol's case extended beyond criminal justice to influence academic research into predatory behavior and institutional responses to women's safety concerns. Universities began studying the Brennan case as an example of how individuals could exploit positions of trust to access victims, while examining the systematic failures that had allowed his crimes to continue undetected for decades. Forensic technology advances that had made solving Carol's case possible continued to evolve, with artificial intelligence and machine learning applications being developed specifically for cold case investigations. The foundation funded research into predictive algorithms that could identify patterns in unsolved cases, suggesting connections that human investigators might miss. The documentary film about Carol's case, produced by an independent filmmaker, won several awards at film festivals and was broadcast on national television, bringing attention to cold case investigations and the importance of maintaining hope, even when cases seem impossible to solve. The film featured interviews with Jennifer Williams, Detective Santos, and several women who had been stalked by Brennan, but never realized the extent of his predatory behavior. Brennan's death in prison 3 years after his conviction eliminated any possibility of learning the location of Carol's remains, but it also provided a sense of closure for her family and the community that had never stopped searching for answers. His refusal to reveal where he had buried Carol became part of his legacy of cruelty, though it also motivated continued search efforts organized by volunteers who refused to accept that her remains might never be found. The basement where Brennan had maintained his shrine to criminal obsession was eventually demolished as part of building renovations, but photographs and evidence from the hidden room were preserved in police archives as educational materials for training investigators. The physical space where he had displayed his trophies was gone, but the lessons learned from discovering it continued to influence how law enforcement approached similar cases. Carol Williams' nursing school classmates, who had lost touch over the years, reconnected after media coverage of Brennan conviction. Many had successful careers in healthcare and decided to honor their former classmate by establishing continuing education programs for nurses working in underserved communities. The programs provided training and resources, while creating a positive legacy from a tragedy that had affected their entire graduating class. The Roosevelt Avenue subway station where Carol had disappeared underwent renovations that included improved lighting, security cameras, and emergency communication systems. The changes were part of a broader transit authority initiative to enhance passenger safety, but they were also influenced by public attention to Carol's case and the vulnerability of commuters traveling alone during early morning and late evening hours. Jennifer Williams continued making annual trips to Queens on the anniversary of Carol's disappearance. But the pilgrimages had evolved from desperate searching into memorial observances that celebrated her sister's life and the positive changes that had emerged from tragedy. The visits included stops at locations throughout the neighborhood where Carol had been remembered by people whose lives she had touched. The cold case unit at the 108th Precinct received permanent funding increases following the success of the Carol Williams investigation, allowing them to hire additional detectives and purchase advanced forensic equipment. The unit became a model for other police departments, while the techniques developed during Carol's case were taught at law enforcement training academies throughout the country. 30 years after Carol Williams disappeared while walking to work on a routine morning in Queens, her story had become a catalyst for changes that protected countless other women from predators who used positions of trust to access their victims. The case demonstrated that justice could prevail, even after decades of silence, and that the persistence of those who refused to forget could transform personal tragedy into lasting positive change for entire communities.